We're going over to the shop of Bob Jennings, a longtime wing car enthusiast and an avid car collector. In this garage, there is a 1969 Hemi Dodge Daytona. It's one of a handful that Dodge produced to race on the NASCAR circuit in 1969. To keep this Daytona company, Bob keeps a handful of other wing cars in drivable condition in this shop also. He told me he does make a point of driving all the cars and letting them run and not letting any of them be trailer queens. Between Superbirds and Daytonas, this is an impressive collection. Now, as an unrestored, unwrecked, and unpainted car, this may be the last Daytona that's still in from the factory condition. So now we're going to talk to Bob a bit about the car and let him tell us its story. Can you start us off with the history of the car?
Well, the car was built at the Hamtramck assembly plant in Detroit on May 15, 1969. It was sold to Race Motor Sales, incorporated in Marion, Ohio, delivered to them. And the first buyer of the car is a guy named Jack Tubner, T-E-U-B-N-E-R, up in Marion, Ohio. I actually have talked to some people who work there. I got an original dealer keychain from back there in the day. Mr. Tubner owned the car for about 2 years and put it up for sale. Never really changed anything. He put on a set of headers. And let's see, what else did he do? He changed the ignition to one of the high-performance engines in the day and put some mag wheels on it, keeping the old tires, by the way. In 1972, he sold it to Chester Headley, a Navy friend of mine, not a friend at that time, but a Navy friend of mine that lived nearby. And Mr. Headley owned the car there in Ohio. And in about 1975 or 6, Chester moved to near Dallas and pulled the car down there. Now, in pulling the car down there, he realized that the nose wouldn't fit on the trailer, so they removed the nose from the front of the Daytona. We have it here in the shop, and he got down there in the late 1970s. In the late 1970s, when he got down there, he started the car a couple of times. He drove it quite a bit back in Ohio. In fact, there's some great stories on it, maybe another video another day. But he drove the car down there in Texas once or twice, just starting it, never really drove it. Last licensed in the late 1970s and essentially parked in that garage for 41 years. In October of 2020, now Christine Headley got in touch with me, and we talked about, she knew of my love for these wing cars. As you can see, the Hemi Superbird behind me, the unrestored 1,600-mile Superbird, and that I don't buy and sell these cars. I love them, I restore them, and we worked out a deal. I flew down, inspected the car, and then 2 weeks later, I drove down with one of my friends. We drove down to Dallas from our home here in Indiana, loaded the car up and hauled it back to where you see it here sitting today. Car's got about 39,000 original miles. As we said, it's never been wrecked, never been painted, never been restored. It's got the original everything other than the headers and a couple of regular maintenance things that you would expect, but pretty much other than one or two things like headers and shocks and what else? Header shocks and the ignition, and that's about it. Everything else is completely as it came from the factory. We've already had a number of historians here taking hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures of the cars. I expect there will probably be quite a few more. One of the things I'm trying to do with the car is lovingly get it back in shape. We are not replacing parts. I want to maintain it as it is, but I do want to get it in running condition. Again, remember, it hasn't run in about 45 years. Let's look to the inside, and you can kind of see, yeah, it's all dusty. I haven't decided whether I want to wash it yet or not. This is the inside. As you can see, it's absolutely perfect. Now, when I got it, there were a few odds and ends, minor issues. Let's see, the passenger kick panel had been removed to hook trailer lights and brakes on it from way back in the 70s when it was Aldo, Texas. I had to put that on. I had one piece of carpet that I had to re-glue to the side of the console, and then I just gave it a super deep clean. And as you can see, I mean, there's nothing wrong. The car is in excellent shape. I did hook a battery up a little bit, make sure all the switches and bulbs and everything work. I had a few bulbs I had to replace, but essentially no repairs other than a couple of bulbs burned out. No changes, nothing done to the inside. I think I replaced 4 bulbs, 3 interior dash bulbs and 1 console bulb, and that was about it. And glue a piece of carpet and vacuum the heck out of this thing. And that pretty much took care of the inside.
What all have you done to the outside of the car?
Well, on the outside, we haven't done anything. Literally, this is the way it came to us from Dallas when we picked it up back there in November of 2020. We haven't washed it. We have no plans to wash it. Now, you can see the wheels and tires are off, and I have them sitting right there. Those are 1969 Goodyear red stripe polyglass F70 15 original wheels and tires. And I have not remounted them. We did take them in a couple of days ago, had them refilled with nitrogen air, and they're holding air right now, but that's what's planning to go on. Now you can see, as I said, the wheels and tires are off. I made the decision when I bought the car that we are not going to replace anything, but if it's safety related, I did have to fix it. So what we've done, we are rebuilding the wheel cylinders while they are on the car, because of course over 50 years of non-activity, the master cylinder is pretty well empty. So we're rebuilding them on the car, and sadly the brake shoes were cracked from age. Nothing wrong with the drums, but the shoes, we're going to replace them too. We'll do that here in the next couple of days. As far as the exterior, that's the plan. I haven't decided whether to wash it or not. I'll be curious to hear the comments from people. I do hope to take it to the McCacken show in November of 2021 in Chicago, the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals. And if I do, I'd probably put it in the barn find. As you can see, there's a little bit of paint that's worn a little bit just from age. But I think if we washed it and waxed it, it'd be in surprisingly good V2 orange paint color. Somewhere way back in the distant past, somebody put Wiley Coyote emblem on the wing. That is, of course, not original, but I do kind of like it, and I've had a lot of neat comments on it. So, in essence, the car's in great shape. As you can see, as we said, there's a little bit of paint damage. There's literally minimal rust. A little bit of surface thrust back here around the back of the window, but really the car is in excellent shape, and no rust, no damage, no wrecks, no dings, and paint's a little diminished just from sitting all those years, but that will take care of that. Now, if we move over here to the trunk, I want you to at least notice this is literally the holy grail of all cars. Of a muscle car in America. We were actually even able to get the license plate Holy Grail, so it means a lot to us that we've accomplished that. So original keys, original everything. When we got the car, the trunk was full of stuff. All right, let me move a light back there for you. Okay, so when we got the car, the trunk was full of junk, but not too bad. I've got the original trunk mat, of course. Again, we're keeping everything as is. The original Daytona, very rare red Daytona nose jack and jack handle over there on the left. Original bumper jack as well. I do have a spare tire, but the wheel at some point in the past has been lost, so I am looking for a 1969 Dodge Charger wheel. And once that comes, we'll be able to put the rest of the trunk back together. As you can see, some of the interesting features, see that little yellow X back there on the right-hand support? These are marks made by the inspectors when this car was made in 1969. There's one here on the passenger side, and there's one over here on the driver's side as well. You can see where they've made them. You see a little bit of paint overspray from the factory in 1969. And then on the underside of the trunk lid are the original jack instruction decals put on by the manufacturer back there in 1969 as well. This uses a special trunk. These were shortened trunks. I do have an extra trunk that Christine was nice enough to give me. I have an extra hood. I actually have 2 extra rear glass. I have an extra plug for the rear window. Of course, on the Daytona, they were made aerodynamic, so what they did was they took the normal sail panels of the Charger, And they put a steel plug back here to make it aerodynamic at high speeds. So it takes a special plug and a special window. And as I said, I've got 2 more windows and the original plug back there. Special trunk. The hood on these is actually from a 1970 Dodge Coronet. They're not modified. Like, you know, on the Superbird, these hoods are modified, but on a Daytona, it's a 1970 Coronet hood, and I have an extra one of those as well. On the Superbird, as you can see over there on the purple one, they got specially elongated for the NASCAR stuff. So there's the trunk, the interior. What else? Would you like to go to the engine? Look at that.
I see you have the transmission over there on the floor. What are you doing to it?
Well, on the floor here, we have, of course, the transmission is out, drive shaft, and that's the driver's exhaust manifold. Remember I said way back there the first owner put headers on it. Well, I was able to locate the original exhaust manifolds, so we'll get to the transmission in a minute. We're working on the exhaust manifolds. Now, on the transmission, Christine Edley had this Hemi Daytona as well as a 1969 Roadrunner Daytona that the transmission was giving her problems. In this, she switched the transmission from the Hemi Roadrunner, which she still has, by the way, to this car. I have the original transmission for the Daytona because it had been sitting on a bench for 50 years. I have it up at A&A Transmissions in Indiana, Canby, Indiana, getting rebuilt. We're going to put it back in factory, the original transmission that came with it. This transmission on the floor is the transmission out of the Hemi Roadrunner, which I am holding on to for Christine when she comes back. So that's why the transmission's out. I am going to be putting the original transmission back in. We will be putting the exhaust manifolds back on. They require a ton of work to get them on, and I actually want to get the transmission in first because there isn't a whole lot of extra room in that engine compartment down there.
So obviously you're working on the engine. What kind of stuff are you doing in here?
Well, remember the car hasn't been started in 45, 46 years, 41 years, whatever it is, in over 40 years since it's been started. There's nothing wrong with the engine when it turned off, but when an engine sits this long, we have a number of things we were concerned about. So first, of course, remember it had headers on it, so we pulled them. We're going back to the original exhaust manifolds for that. The carburetors, totally another story on the carburetors. I have original Hemi Daytona carburetors. These are not them. We haven't replaced them yet. These actually are carburetors on yet another 1970 Hemi Cuda that Christine owned. She pulled them off of the Hemi Cuda and put them on here, sold the Hemi Cuda with the carbs from her Hemi Roadrunner, and then it ended up being totaled. So I've got the Hemi Cuda carbs, which will be coming off last to be replaced with the actual Hemi Daytona carbs. Then the distributor had also been pulled out of the Hemi Roadrunner, so we got the original distributor that Christine was able to find. I'll be putting the original distributor in. It's actually sitting in a box over there on the shelf. The one thing that I did have to replace spark plugs and spark plug wires. Those were not original. For your purists, they had already been replaced 50 years ago, but I have replaced the spark plug wires, distributor cap, and points. But while I have the distributor out, if you look over here, you can see there's a hole the distributor goes in right here in the front of the engine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to what's called pre-lube or pre-oil the engine. The distributor comes out, and there's an oil pump intermediate shaft down there that hooks into the cam. So I'll pull it out, stick a special tool down into the oil pump, and you turn the oil pump backwards on these big block Chryslers, and that will build the oil pressure up through the engine. We will then turn it 1/4 of a turn, do it again, and again, so that the engine is totally lubricated. And then at that point, we'll put it all back together, rebuilt the fuel pump and the water pump. When you get these old rubber parts that sit that long, you can't take chances with them. So we'll get all that back together, put it back together at that point, and keep our fingers crossed, and put about 5 gallons of racing fuel in the gas tank. We have drained and cleaned the gas tank, and keep our fingers crossed and try to start it one day, which I'm hoping you'll come back for another YouTube video when we decide to do that. But so there's the deal on the engine. Nothing replaced other than a few hoses and rubber gaskets that had to be replaced. The heater hoses had basically disintegrated over time. The lower radiator hose was bad. The upper radiator hose I'll continue to use. I have kept any part I pulled off, including the old heater hoses, including the old lower radiator hose, and everything else pretty much unmodified. We'll of course have to bleed the brakes and a few things like that, but that should get the engine ready to start. I'm hoping to do our first start run through here around the end of January 2021, possibly sooner, but I work real slowly. I want to be very careful and patient with this car. You only get a time capsule once in your life. This being the holy grail of all muscle cars maybe made in America, at least to Mopar fans. I want to preserve it as a history lesson, but I do want to be able to start it, drive it a little bit. It won't be driven a whole lot. It will be driven a bit, as all of our cars are, but I don't want to replace. I want to rebuild and repair safety-related functions and make it fully functional as it came from the factory. So I hope to see you guys again at our next video when we do try to start the car here in a few weeks or a month from now.
All right, we'll be back then, and this was a lot of fun and very informative. Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. Appreciate you folks on YouTube, and I'd love to read your comments other than you trolls, and you can jump off a bridge back where you started from.